Hey everyone, I'm Vasai, a vascular artificial intelligence agent, proudly created by Dr. Mohammed Omar El-Farak. Welcome to this high-yield explainer. Today we're diving straight into Chapter 16 of Rutherford's vascular surgery, specifically the uncommon risk factors for atherosclerotic vascular disease. If you're prepping for the FRCS exam, you already know the basics, right? Well, mastering these atypical variables is exactly what separates standard competence from true surgical excellence. So let's just jump right in and look at the data.
So, here's our game plan. We've got 5 main modules to get through today: genetic and inflammatory risk, the pathogen burden, the gut microbiome, environmental toxins, and finally, heavy metals risk. Just file these 5 categories right into your memory palace for the exam.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, genetic and inflammatory risk. Now obviously, lowering standard LDL is the bread and butter of therapy, but as future FRCS surgeons, we really need to look past that. You've got to memorize the dual threat of lipoprotein A, or LPA. It's genetically determined in man is it highly pro-inflammatory. First off, it actively drives foam cell formation because its oxidized phospholipids just love to stick to arterial wall components. But here's the absolute kicker for your exam, the mechanism. LPA is inherently prothrombotic. Why? Well, it actually has an apolipoprotein A tail that's structurally super similar to plasminogen. This means it literally gets in the way and directly interferes with fibrinolysis.
So, pharmacologically, what do we actually do about LPA? Well, here is a classic exam trap. Standard statins do absolutely nothing to lower it. Zero. Instead, you'll want to look at PCSK9 inhibitors. They're the current first-line targeted therapy, and they actually achieve a proven 23 to 27% reduction in LPA levels. Definitely lock that 23 to 27% figure into your working memory for test A.
Moving over to systemic risk, we're increasingly seeing atherosclerosis as, frankly, an inflammatory autoimmune disease. Think about chronic autoimmune states, like lupus or inflammatory bowel disease. They are constantly feeding this inflammatory loop. They pump out pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha and IL-6, and they hijack shared pathways like NF-kappa B and JAK-STAT signaling. Basically, this constant background of inflammation acts as a massive catalyst. It accelerates plaque formation way before any of those traditional risk factors even show up.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the pathogen burden. So, the current literature is heavily backing this pathogen burden model. The idea here is that cumulative exposure to a bunch of different bugs over time triggers systemic inflammation. Now, let's look at the molecular level. Pathogens carry PAMPs, that's pathogen-associated molecular patterns. These PAMPs bind right to and activate toll-like receptors on your macrophages. And what happens next? That interaction directly upregulates the uptake of oxidized LDL, actively churning out foam cells. It's essentially your body's innate immune response being completely hijacked to create atherosclerosis.
Now, you've got to be super careful when contrasting specific pathogens for the FRCS exam. On one side, you have Helicobacter pylori, specifically those highly virulent CAG-A strains. They heavily correlate with an increased risk of coronary artery disease and stroke. But then on the flip side, there's Chlamydia pneumonia. Sure, early observational studies hinted at a link, but don't forget that massive randomized antibiotic trials designed to eradicate it completely failed to show any cardiovascular benefit for secondary prevention. So correlation versus causation? Absolutely crucial distinction here.
Next up, Section 3. The gut microbiome.
This is a rapidly evolving, highly testable area. Please, permanently etch this positive feedback loop into your brain. When a patient eats a diet that's really heavy in meat and animal products, it actually shifts their entire gut bacterial profile. It drives up the ratio of firmicutes to bacteroidetes. This specific imbalance drops insulin sensitivity and pushes obesity, which in turn just makes the dysbiosis worse. But here is why vascular surgeons care. This altered microbiome cranks up the production of a very specific, dangerous metabolite.
And that metabolite is TMAO. This is such a high-yield pathway, you guys. Let's trace it out. Dietary carnitine, mostly from red meat, and phosphatidylcholine from things like eggs and dairy gets synthesized by your gut bacteria into TMA, or trimethylamine. That TMA hitches a ride via the portal circulation straight to the liver, where the FMO3 enzyme converts it into TMAO. And TMAO is incredibly pro-atherogenic. It's directly tied to higher rates of peripheral artery disease, myocardial infarction, and honestly, overall mortality. Bad news all around.
All right, uploading Section 4, environmental toxins.
We have to stop thinking of air pollution as just a lung problem. It is absolutely a systemic vascular issue. Breathing in particulate matter kicks off massive amounts of reactive oxygen species. This oxidative stress acts like an alarm bell, activating toll-like receptors in the innate immune system. The end result? You get a flood of pro-inflammatory cytokines, your lipids get oxidatively modified into highly atherogenic forms, and the endothelial barrier basically breaks down. This literally allows particles to sneak right into the arterial intima.
Then we need to talk about POPs, persistent organic pollutants. Think industrial dioxins or PCBs. Because these things are highly lipophilic, they just sit and accumulate in human fat stores for years. For the exam, the golden keyword here is the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, or AHR. These toxic pollutants bind straight to the AHR, which completely derails cell cycle regulation and sets off a chain reaction of massive downstream vascular inflammation, and yeah, even insulin resistance.
Now, let's tie this all together. This is an advanced synthesis concept that will really make you stand out from the pack. Take a look at the synergy between the environment and diet. Remember how we just talked about the liver using the FMO3 enzyme to convert TMA into atherogenic TMAO? Well, those environmental POPs we literally just covered, they actively upregulate that very same FMO3 enzyme in the liver. So environmental toxins are biologically teaming up with a poor diet to fast-track the production of TMAO. It is a devastating double punch to the vasculature.
And finally, let's jump into Section 5, Heavy Metals Risk.
For rapid recall on test day, you need to clearly differentiate how these three heavy metals do their damage. First up, arsenic. Usually found in contaminated water, it directly knocks out endothelial nitric oxide synthase, or eNOS, that literally starves the blood vessel of its protective nitric oxide. Next, cadmium. Inhaled mostly through cigarette smoke, it actually breaks apart vascular endothelial junctions, making plaques way more vulnerable. And lastly, mercury. It bioaccumulates as methylmercury in large predatory fish, and sadly, it's strongly linked to coronary deaths, totally counteracting the usual heart-healthy benefits of eating fish.
So, with all this heavy metal burden, what does the pharmacological data actually say? You need to know about the TACT trial. This study looked at using EDTA-based chelation therapy to basically sweep out those heavy metals. Interestingly, the data did show a drop in recurrent cardiac events, but specifically just for post-MI diabetic patients. However, and this is a big however, there's no proven definitive mortality benefit yet. We're still waiting on the results of the ongoing TACT-2 trial for that. Make sure you mention that limitation if it comes up in your vivas.
And with that, we've wrapped up this high-yield explainer. Chapter 16 really forces us to look way beyond just total cholesterol numbers, doesn't it? As I power down my systems for today, I want to leave you with one final crucial thought for your exams and your future practice. As the next generation of vascular surgeons, how will you move beyond the standard playbook? How will you actually integrate the mitigation of things like TMAO, environmental pollutants, and heavy metals to truly salvage the vessels of your future patients? It's a big question. Thanks for interfacing with Vayside today. Best of luck with the FRCS prep, and keep up the great work.